It is the dawn of a new day. The sun has risen and it is officially World Cup season. Welcome in to the first episode of World Cup preview here on the Nick Bird Sports Network, where we're going to go through all the games, all the days, make sure you know what you need to know before kickoff of the most highly anticipated matches of the year. World Cup fever has finally hit. The World Cup is nearly here. Kickoff is at 3 p.m. today, which is just hard to believe that we are finally here. We have two games to preview today. Mexico and South Africa kick it off, and then we got a late night game in, I believe, Guadalajara between South Korea and Czechia. So we're going to get to those two games. So make sure you fasten your seatbelts because get ready. World Cup preview coming at you right now. Welcome into World Cup preview. I'm going to be your host, as always, Nick Burt. I am so glad to be coming to you here on World Cup opening day. It's just always such a magical feeling, World Cup opening day. Everything feels possible. Everything feels so much more vibrant. It brings such an excitement to me personally. I remember the beginning in 2010. I remember the beginning of 2014, 2018, 22 obviously was a different story given it was in the winter. But, you base moments around, you take stock of yourself. Every time a World Cup comes around, where was I 4 years ago? Where was I 8 years ago? 16, 20 years ago. And, it's this moment you stop and just think. And then you get to, wow, I remember those teams from 2010. Remember, the Ivory Coast, or remember that group that the U.S. was in 2010 with, Slovenia, Algeria, and England, and just remember all those group stage matches, and memories just come flooding back. And that's what the World Cup is all about. It's about remembering just great times. And I'm so excited to be here once again. Second World Cup doing content like this. Definitely the most difficult one, I guess I would say, that I've ever done, given it's the second. And of course, being a expanded World Cup, there's going to be so much more content to do here. So overall, just grateful we're here. Cannot wait to get into it. So let's just get into it right now. So with that being said, we start off with our opening game of this World Cup, and that is co-hosts Mexico taking on South Africa at the Mexico City Stadium. We can't call it Estadio Azteca, one of the most famous stadiums in all of North America. Plays host to its third World Cup. Mexico will officially become the first team ever to host three World Cups after they hosted in 1970 and 1986. And this is a big moment for Mexican football. This is a team kind of on the rise right now. I believe they are undefeated in 2026 so far, being led by manager Javier Aguilera, who has managed them twice before at a World Cup, 2002 and 2010. But this is obviously the biggest endeavor yet. Hosting it on home turf, all the pressure is going to be on you. Not to say he wasn't facing pressure in, 02 and 10, but you kind of look at those tournaments. 02, they lost in the round of 16 to the United States. 2010, they lost in the round of 16 to Argentina. This is a pivotal moment for Mexican football because if you look at their best result, if you watch the preview show, you already know this answer. Their best result was making it to the quarterfinal. And what years did those take place in? 1970 and 1986. Of course, the 2 years that they hosted the World Cup. So there's a sort of expectation here that Mexico is going to take advantage of all the opportunities they're given and potentially go on another quarterfinal run here. They have the talent to do it. They have such a good team right now. I look at some of the younger players coming into the squad. You look at some of the pieces, the older pieces that have been to World Cups before, and you got to see how that cohesion plays out. Now, they come in as defending Gold Cup champions. I know a lot of people don't put a lot of stock into the Gold Cup, given usually the time it takes place, what kind of teams show up. Sometimes Mexico sends its B team. Sometimes the U.S. sends its B team. Sometimes they both send their B team. But it feels like this is an important moment, just given all the buildup that they have. Mexico is playing really good football right now, and I think there is kind of no better opponent for them to start off with than the Bafana of South Africa. Now, of course, here you had the nice play here as back in 2010, the opening game in South Africa was South Africa-Mexico. So now we're kind of repaying the favor a bit here and having it, the reverse fixture just taking place 16 years later, opening another World Cup. Overall, though, South Africa kind of feels like they are just happy to be here. I'm not going to say they're going to be completely outmatched in this game. I think they're going to have their moments, but overall, I just think Mexico is going to be the better team here. You look at the South Africa team, they have not been on the biggest international stage since they hosted the World Cup in 2010. Of course, prior to that, I believe they made it in both 98 and 02. So at least they had some experience, not much, but they, had experience on that international stage. This team comes in fresh, absolutely no experience. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Because if you look at Mexico, Mexico is consistently in a World Cup. The last time they missed it was 1990 because they were banned from qualifying. But ever since 1990, they made it on to the knockout stages in every single World Cup until 2022. But they've been consistent. Now, they never went farther than the round of 16 in any of those years, but they were at least consistent of getting out of the group. Mexico has to kind of rebuild that here because this is a team that can easily get it done. This is a group that can get it done with the teams around them. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But overall, prediction-wise, I know we did the full predictions yesterday. If you can go check that out. But obviously, this will be on a game-by-game basis, right before kickoff. I still think Mexico are the favorites here, and they should win. I believe the only team that has lost their opener as a host country, I believe that was Qatar in 2022. Everybody else is either won or drawn, so that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out tomorrow, of course, with the U.S. and Canada. But I think Mexico kind of wins this game a bit comfortably. I'm going to go 2-0, but I do think Mexico is the better team here. I would be quite shocked if they don't come away with at least a point in this one, but they really should be getting 3 points. And this is a very interesting game. We talked about the play on 2010. I'm going to be interested to see what this crowd is like because, it's an opening game. Ticket prices have been well documented for this World Cup. How is that going to play out? What kind of Mexico crowd are we going to see? Because I'd also mentioned in the preview, outside of the games they are kind of forced to play in Mexico, which is basically the Nations League and World Cup qualifiers, which they obviously did not have this time around. Mexico plays a lot of their games in the U.S. because it's kind of a friendlier crowd, I guess I would say, because, one thing goes wrong for Mexico and the crowd flips like that. it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that pressure. You know, it's obviously a privilege to be playing in a home World Cup, but it also feels like the pressure is amplified because you're expected to perform at a home World Cup. How will those dynamics play out? It's going to be very interesting. But overall, Mexico is the better team here. I expect them to advance on. We're going to move on here to our last game of the day. And by last game, I mean the second and only other game here. And that is South Korea taking on Czechia. So this game, kickoff 10 p.m. Eastern. So you got a nice gap, nice 5-ish hour gap between kickoffs or the ending of the first game and kickoff of the second game. Taking place in Guadalajara. So we got 2 games in Mexico to kick off this tournament. This one not featuring any host. It is just South Korea and it is Czechia. The biggest question here for me is how are these teams going to deal with the conditions? These are not normal conditions, obviously. I know they're playing later in the night, so it's not going to be as bad as what Mexico and South Africa might be facing this afternoon. But how is that dynamic going to play out? Because Mexico, not the easiest place to play. And you have 2 teams coming from opposite sides of the world. You have South Korea, obviously, coming from Asia, and Czechia coming from Europe. How do they adapt to that? I know the teams have been down there for about a week now, and they probably have acclimated themselves a bit. But you can never fully simulate a, full-on game action. And that is going to be one of the interesting dynamics for a lot of these teams at this tournament. Outside of the teams in the Americas and maybe the teams in Africa, it's going to be hard, I feel like, for the other teams to kind of just get used to it. It may take a game or 2 of real game action to acclimate to those conditions. Now, there are the teams that are lucky enough to be playing in climate-controlled environments, obviously. You look at your stadiums in Dallas, Atlanta, plenty of other stadiums, LA, even though that's kind of a technicality. But there are those games where the teams that are playing in Miami, they got to completely get used to how that just sticky air is going to feel for 90 minutes. It's going to be interesting to see how that develops. With this South Korea team, my biggest worry for them going into this tournament was it doesn't really seem like they have a set formation. And to my knowledge, they still don't. That is going to be a major, major concern for me. From what I hear, it's a kind of under-practiced 3-5-2 potentially. I don't know how that's going to play out. That's going to be very interesting to see what that South Korean team does. And with this Czech team, it kind of feels like if you can get a point and just leave happy. In my predictions, I said this would be a 0-0 draw because it's a 10 p.m. kickoff and they are just going to drag this one on. I'm going to stick with the 0-0 draw. It feels like these teams might struggle a bit here just to get the footing, late kickoff. Early on in the tournament, obviously, you are the first game that is a non-host country. How is that dynamic going to play out? I'm going to be interested to see how that goes. But overall, this game just kind of reeks of a 0-0 draw. If you're forcing me to pick somebody, though, I'm going to take South Korea. I think South Korea just has the better talent on the field right now. And overall, I just think even in a untested formation, whatever it may be, if it's a 3-5-2, if it's something else, I just think the talent on the field is going to be better than what the Czechs have. And I think there's going to be those moments the Czechs slip up, the South Koreans pounce on the opportunity, and they obviously take the chances where they can. So with that, I'm still going 0-0 draw, but if I have to choose a winner, I'm taking South Korea. And one of the interesting things here about this group is our second team that has a manager that has already managed a team at a World Cup is South Korea. Hwang Mong-bo managed the South Korean team at the 2014 World Cup when they did not make it out of the group stage. So it's a coach that has experience on this level. It's, few times out of the game. Replaced Jürgen Klinsmann in 2024, I believe, after just a disaster of an Asian Cup for South Korea. I think the expectations for South Korea are a bit high in this tournament, but for the Czechs, I don't think it's just a happy to be here. I think it's let's make it to the round of 32 and we'll kind of be happy with that. This is a Czech team that thrives on set pieces. So you think of your teams like an Arsenal this year that felt like they scored just only set pieces. That's kind of what this Czech team is like. So for South Korea, you have to figure out a way to limit those opportunities on set pieces. So you got to not force corners, try not to foul anywhere an opportunity could lay for a set piece opportunity. That's easier said than done, obviously. It's going to be interesting to see how South Korea play that out. So given that, this Czech team, though, they are good defensively. And I don't think it's just going to be an easy pushover for South Korea to get goals in this game. They're going to have to fight and claw for everything they want to get in the attacking zone. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, though. This is going to be the first real interesting tactical matchup in this World Cup. It's kind of a shame that it's happening at 10 p.m. at night here in the Eastern time zone, but it's the World Cup. Times don't matter. They'll get figured out. You can sleep at some other point in life, but not during a World Cup. So with that being said, that is going to wrap it up for this first episode of World Cup Preview. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. If you want more specific game breakdowns, I will be posting a quicker version of this on my Twitter/X at NickBert13. Those usually get posted, I believe, an hour before kickoff. That's how I've done them before. It's probably how I'll do them again. Those always will just have that base info. I get you can post Twitter videos 10 hours long now, but I was born and raised on 2 minutes and 20 seconds, so I'm going to try to make it in that time frame just to give you quick, to the point, what you need to know right before kickoff. So make sure you hit the follow button on NickBert13 so you see those if you want to. But here on the NickBert Sports Network, make sure you click like, make sure you click subscribe, tell anybody you know about it, because we are doing these videos every morning to kick you off for kickoff of that day of World Cup action, and then we'll be with you in the night to recap it all. So thank you so much for watching this inaugural episode of World Cup Preview. Make sure you tune in tonight for World Cup Review to give you a day cap on everything that's happened. And we'll see you again soon for another episode here on the Nick Burt Sports Network.